Hi and welcome back to another video. This one again is on SCM. As the name suggests, it's about security profiles, where we configure them and have a quick look at snippets as well. Please, if you do want to, of course, don't feel pressed into anything. If you could like and subscribe, that would be absolutely awesome. It does help, and I really want to try and build the channel this year, 25. Really want to try and build it so that it's got a lot of resources that people can use for real world scenarios as well. So looking at actually implementing these things in place as opposed to just following an admin guide, which is perfectly valid, absolutely valid way of showing somebody how to do something. Absolutely perfect. It's exactly, because you know it's exactly how Palo wanted it. But the problem with admin guides, as we all know, is that they don't always follow the nuances of changes in between where the documentation was written and the software as it is now. And additionally as well, of course, no admin guide can take into consideration your work environment. So I say, again, if you do want to, please like and subscribe. It would be awesome. But for now, let's just get straight into the video. So the first thing I want to say about the security services, the security policies, profiles, sorry, within here is it's found within the security services. Quick talk about snippets. So with snippets, you've got folders and snippets, and snippets are snippets of policies and everything, and they're self-contained. They have all of the options that are pertinent to that. They're self-contained within the snippet of code, and it can then be inserted into wherever you want it, where you want to associate it with. So if we look at the O365 best practice, that's really annoying me that it keeps doing that. O365 best practice, we can see that we've got the configuration for the anti-spyware. We have the best practice rule there. Again, if we drop this down to vulnerability protection, so we're still in O365. So all this will be then applied to Prisma Access. So if we go to overview, I'll show you where I get that from. So our snippet association is Prisma Access. Okay. If we come back to here, go to Prisma Access, we go to vulnerability protection, for instance, we can see that we have the profiles in there where they're from, they're global and predefined, and so we can see that that's available there, and that's from that snippet that we saw, because that then holds all of its. Again, come back here. We can see that we've got the best practice, and it holds all the configurations within it. And again, going down wildfire and antivirus, you got a wildfire and antivirus as well for best practice. This is read only here. You would have to then go into the configuration scope that it's from, and the location is predefined. So if we were to go to global, we can edit this here, global predefined, and then we can edit it from here. Okay, so if we then come back to here, folders, Prisma Access, and we were to look at security policy, for instance. So security policy is where we see the O365 best practice. You can see that there. If we click into any one of these to edit it, you'll see it takes us to the O365 best practice snippet. If we again go back, so you come back to Prisma Access and it's all good. We're back in Prisma Access. Whereas if we go for something that is in Prisma Access, so ADEM access, for instance, which is one of the rules you might find you need, you can see we can edit it within that, but we're still remaining within that Prisma Access folder. It takes a little bit of a while to get your head around. That's only a very quick introduction to it. I will do one, go in depth on snippets, because they can be very, very useful, but they can also be very, very confusing. Okay, so our security profiles, which is what this one is about, is we're going to look at anti-spyware. Okay, so this again is within the scope of Prisma Access. If we were to go back to global, we could put one in global, and it would then be inherited the same way. Okay, so we've come back to Prisma Access, and you can see that's actually come from global. If we wanted to create a new one, we'd add a new profile. So call it our example profile. I'm going to add a rule for critical. So critical, and our action is going to be, let's reset, no, let's just drop it. So we're going to drop it. So critical, any category, any threat name, same thing again. And then one thing that it does do here, which of course is I think is brilliant, is it then shows you the matching signatures for that underneath. We're going to save that. That's our anti-spyware rules. We've then got our overrides, which we add the same way. So if we wanted to override for that, for instance, you see the override for there, the ID is 103. And then we are going to match criteria, any threat ID. There we go. That errored because there was a space in there. And then we can see we've got the user agent traffic there. And we're going to override that. And the action we're going to do for it is we're going to alert. And we're going to do an extended capture, for instance. And then we can save that. And then we have an override for that threat ID. Inline cloud analysis is using inline cloud analysis. It's just exactly the same as when we see in the firewalls. So we can either enable it or not enable it. And then we have the same thing again. We have the enable, and then we have the alert settings based on that. The action settings based on that. And again, that's one of those things that you have to sort of work out. Inline cloud analysis, what actions you want to take from that, because that is obviously in real time. And may not necessarily be as reliable as, you know, actual the lists and the databases and so on. Got the exceptions again for the EDLs and URLs, so you can put an EDL list in there for anything that you're going to you need an exception for, so as not to be affected by this. And then the exceptions for the IP addresses, as we have previously, sort of in the hardware. We also have as well, if I just come back to here, sorry, I hadn't done that. So if we look at this, we've got an interesting thing we have is we have profile groups, and we can see straight away the security rules using this profile, a lot easier, and a critical and high severity, so not being blocked, and the hits that are on it as well. So if we click into it, we go to profile usage, we get a list of the rules that are there. We get a list of the profile groups that are contained in that profile and the rules that profile is currently active within, which I think is brilliant, to be honest with you. Okay, so that's anti-spyware. The spyware signatures and everything are written the same way. Vulnerability protection is the same thing again. So we've got our configuration, our custom signatures across the top. We'd write your custom signature using the same details, and it's the same 41 to 45 and 68 to 69 or 68 1. For your threat ID range you can do, that's the custom threat ID range. So that's threat IDs that are not used by any other threat within the Palo Alto ecosystem, so you can be fairly sure that there's going to be no crossover. You can search for threats. Search for threats there by CV or threat ID, as we've seen there. To configure it again, we've got our best practice, and again that works on the way down. So that's from global as is there. We're going to add our profile. We're going to do our example profile UL, even though I didn't save the last one, which I'm sure everybody's, sort of is shouting out now. Okay, so if we're going to go again for critical, any, and then we're going to do that, any threat ID, and then we see the matching signatures again. We're going to do that. And then we can action default. We could, again, as we do with everything else, we could then change the action from that to drop, and then enable the packet capture. Again, these are sort of top down, so it's all configured the same way as it would be on the firewall. We have the overrides as well for the threat IDs. We can add an override for a threat ID, and then we can save that. So we save that. This time round, we'll save that one. Right, and then we've got the wildfire and antivirus. Again, so wildfire and antivirus is kind of very much put together. We can look into the best practice one to see, well, there's again, we've got the enforcement actions for the protocols. We can select for a packet capture, not in this one because it's the best profile one, which is uneditable. But again, we get this really helpful security rules using this profile 8, and the profile groups contain this profile, so you know where it's being used. The advanced settings for the signature exceptions, file exceptions, and application exceptions. Again, it's very much as it was before. So you want to accept a signature, you want to accept a file, partial hash or the file name, and then we've got the profile usage again, so we can see where this is being used. Again, we can see the profile groups and what rules it's being used in. DNS security. So DNS security was in the firewalls. I don't believe it's been broken out yet, but in the firewalls, it was in the anti-spyware. So that's where you found it was anti-spyware, and that's what it was. Now it's been broken out into something different. In fact, actually, anecdotally, it did cause a bit of a problem with some posture checking and best practice assessment checking previously, because it was looking for it in the wrong place and it said it never existed. However, that's now been fixed, so we don't need to worry about that too much. So DNS security, we can look into, say, profile, and again we see the same as what we see on the firewall. Really, there isn't anything using this currently, but we have the test domain list, which is our test domain list, which is our EDL, which we saw before, which we can allow or we can block. Again, we can change our settings as we did previously. We've got the overrides there for DNS security for those FQDNs. So if you've got an issue with something that's being flagged, you can override it there. And again, you can customize your DNS sinkhole settings, and then DNS zone misconfigurations is configured down there. Again, it's very much the same. DNS security subscriptions work exactly the same way. Days unused is 113, shows you how long it's not been used for, because it doesn't exist anywhere. And then it's configured the same way really as DNS security. It's just in that slightly different place. You've got advanced DNS security there for the DNS security server, the latency time for the lookups. That can be adjusted again. URL access management. So URL access management is your URL filtering categories. It's just named differently here. And again, we've got the same thing again. So we create our profiles here and we give it our name. Okay. And then again, we've got our decrypt exception at the top, because that's our custom URL category that we've created. Got the user credential detection there. Then you've got the IP user mapping, domain credential filter, and use group mapping. And then you can select your log severity there as you can previously. Again, it's one of those things, user credential detection it's not absolutely 100% foolproof. So again, you have to sort of weigh up how much information I need to know and how much tolerance have I got for false positives. The advanced inline URL categorization, again, is the same way. Enable it and enable local. Not entirely sure exactly how that works, if I'm honest, with Prisma Access. If you was on the firewall, of course, if you was using this to configure a firewall, then it would do it exactly that way. But with Prisma Access, which is that's all I really have, I'm not sure what the local inline, I guess it would run on the node in the cloud. But cloud inline categorization is, speaks for itself. And then we have exceptions, and then we have our settings for the login. So user agent refer x forwarded for, I would suggest. Bearing in mind that all this, so you're going to have to back off to CDL initially, essentially for this. So once you've sized it, this really is as good as, you want as much login as possible is what I'm trying to say. I'm struggling to say it for some reason, but that's what I wanted to say. Safe search enforcement is again looking for browser settings and see if safe search is enabled. There is one thing that I wanted to point out, and to do that, I have to just go back to just quickly before we do. Profile usage again is where it's used. Of course, this hasn't been saved, so we can save it though if we want. Okay, so we saved that and that's there. Now, one thing that I want to point out about URL filtering categories, and this is the same as well, it goes for the hardware firewalls too, but it's something that I think is important, is where you have site access for block and everything, we see where we have the green dot next to these categories for site access and user credential submission. So these compromised website, for instance, is a new category. So Palo Alto are always expanding their definitions of categories, are always expanding their definitions of websites, and that's to give the best user experience you possibly can. And from an admin point of view, it's absolutely to be commended, because the more focused they are on what type of sites you're going to, it ultimately allows you to secure the environment greater with less noise, less false positives, because you've got a better categorization. The issue I have with it is that when it adds new ones, it adds them as allow. And that means that you have to continually keep coming back. It's an admin overhead. You have to continually keep coming back to check. Because it's allow, it means that potentially you could now be allowing site access through that rule to AI website generator, for instance, but you won't get a log for it because it only logs on alert or an action other than allow. So that's something to be aware of. That's something I think is very to be aware of. Because I mean, for instance, in this particular case, you've got AI media service, blah blah blah, but you do also have compromised website, and I think there was another one. There was marijuana, and there was another one here: remote access and scanning activity. So there's sites like that that I think really should be put in as alert, but mine is not a reason why. So the security rules, again, using this profile, so we can click on the security rules using this profile, and we can see what rules are used in it, and then it follows through the same as all the others. So we have file blocking as well. File blocking is the same as file blocking elsewhere. We have a best practice profile, which is to block these file types. This is what it's going to block. I have discovered that the continue option isn't necessarily 100% reliable, but I don't know, it could be down to my slightly dodgy lab, which anybody who's watched any of my other videos will know is actually quite dodgy. So okay, so we're going to have a look at now how we do the rules and look at them. So let's just have a quick look. So best practice there is blocking these rules. Now, blocking these file types. So essentially, what I'd be tempted to say is in an enterprise environment, there's only certain things that you would want to block. So if we wanted to edit this particular file blocking rule, what we've got is any file type, so any, best practice, which is these, or then we have a manual selection. If we have a manual selection, what we've got originally is we've got these targets here, so we can click and remove, or then we can add these other file types here. So we've got PE files, we can add it up there, and then PE will appear, and the same with removing these. Okay. If we go back to it, sorry, my bad. So if we come back to it, and then we just do manual select, we've already got those ones there. If we go to best practice, it just gives us the best practice file. So the thing to do would be to manual select. This particular instance, I think these are all valid file types to block, apart from 7-zip. A lot of stuff is 7-zip these days. Okay, so I would remove 7-zip from there. Click save. There is another best practice rule as well for encrypted RAR and encrypted zip, but that's not in my version for some reason. Then now continue rules, we're going to have exe, which you're going to have a continue function for, so that you'll then get a page that says, oh, do you want to continue? Yes, let's crack on. And then that produces a log, and you download it from there. And then we have an alert rule, and for the alert rule, what I'd be tempted to do is I would alert any applications, any file types, and then file types any. Okay, so now you're going to get an alert for all file types going in whichever direction. I'd go steady with that potentially, because that might you might end up with a lot of noise, but it's what I'd be tempted to do. Again, these can then be added to profile groups. So we have a profile, and then we have the profile groups. That's a very familiar screen that we've all got when we look at hardware firewalls. And then we have the usage, which is internet first rule, which is probably not a particularly good name for a rule. Decryption again, pass over web security, because that's something else. So decryption policies now. So we haven't got any decryption policies in global. So we'll go through to Prisma where they exist. In fact, I think I've actually put them in global protect. Yeah. So put them in global protect. We write our decryption policies exactly the same as we did before, and then we can look at the categories that we want to. So, for instance, this is not decrypt. Okay, so we've got define the match criteria again. It's the zones. Again, there's trust and untrust, and that's it. So custom zones. We're going to match on the global protect global pool, which is my pool of IP addresses. We can add the address groups, add external dynamic lists, and so on. We can add match users, and then the destination is done the same way. It's all really very simple, and it looks a bit odd to begin with, but it's all very good. And then we've got the services and URLs, so we can select our services, add services or add service groups, any service, or match application default for whatever service is going through it. And then you have the URL category entities, which you can then add, and you'd add by clicking the little thing. So if we want to say we want to remove Windows Update, for instance, or we can add an external dynamic list or a SaaS application endpoint. Advanced inspection. This is what we're doing with it. We're enforcing TLS and certificate validation. So we're enforcing TLS certificate validation. And then we have a decryption profile, which is configured within the decryption profiles. And that gives us our settings for the different, what certificates we're prepared to accept. We're prepared to accept untrusted issuers, for instance, or expired certificates. Okay, so we're going to save that because that's going to add our Windows Update to it. And then underneath we have the decryption profiles, which is same as the profiles we had previously. So, for instance, the best practice one, what are we going to accept? And again, we'll just quickly run through that. So if we're going to do our mode 44 decrypt profile. Oh, I'm so imaginative. Again, we've got our handshake settings. So for SSL decryption, you have this. This is what we're going to accept. This is our authentication algorithms and so on. So you may want to say remove 3DES from that and say I don't want 3DES, or RC4 because that is that's insecure, or SHA-1. We're going to remove that as well. So we're going to keep these in here. If we wanted to add one back in, then we'd add one back in there. These little plus signs then for adding. And again, we've got our TLS settings for our minimum protocol version. We're not going to accept anything lower than that. And our max version, which is what we'll accept max. For SSL forward proxy, remember this is for stuff that's going out. So it is being proxied. It's traffic out to the internet. So block sessions with expired certificates, sessions with untrusted issuer. So it's expired certificate that's offered by the other side. The unsupported modes, if we're unsupporting version or unsupported cipher suites, we're going to block those as well. And bypass server certificate validation. For inbound inspection, we have the same settings as we do on hardware. So we have the block sessions with unsupported versions, and then if HSM is not available, so if your private, your certificate and private key is stored in HSM and it's not available, we'll block that as well. So because you can't decrypt then inbound. And then no decryption, which is one that can sometimes catch people out, because you think if you're doing no decryption, if it's going to hit a no decryption policy, then there's going to be no issues and you won't get a decrypt error. But you can still get a decrypt error because of these two here. So block sessions with expired certificate and block sessions with untrusted issuer. Now, I'm going to say this and I'm going to sound like I really know what I'm talking about, but that's because it's literally something that's happened today that I'm aware of today. A lot of times you get a certificate validation error. You'll see it in the logs. You'll see a certificate validation error. And you think it's because it doesn't trust the root or the chain. Well, it shows for the root and the chain. It will show that it's untrusted. And a lot of times it's because the website hasn't provided the intermediate cert or one of the intermediate certs. And then you simply need to go and get that certificate and put it in, or rather than putting in an exception for it. So we've got the decryption profiles there. So be careful, be wary of that. If you've got decrypt validation, make sure you can use SSL Labs for that. SSL Labs, you can go and you can do a test against it, and it will show you if there's a certificate that isn't supplied by the site, so they haven't loaded it onto their server, so it's not going to show it. You've got the best practice checks there. For our decryption settings, everything is set there. Let's see if we can come onto it. So we've got decryption settings. So there, sorry. So certificate and proxy infrastructure sites. Those are our certificates we've got. I'll show you where they are in a minute. And then settings, inspect TLS, handshake messages, and so on. Again, it says if the blocked based on inspection, it can cause an issue with the response page. That's because it doesn't ever get it. Clears the session. Response pages are served within the same session. If the session is cleared off, like if you've got CTD inspection, for instance, of the handshake on firewalls, you'll end up with just nothing to reset. The non-decryptable sites list is here, so that's your non-decryptable, that's your decryption exclusion sites that you see on the firewalls, that's here, and then we have customs exclusions there. Again, we can add it, and then you add that as a host name and give it a description. So that's the security profiles, sort of wrapped up in a nutshell, so as to speak. They do go exactly the same way. You then apply them to the security rule. If I just look at a security rule, we can look at any one. I'll go to Global Protect because mine is in there. And then if we go to non-standard ports, for instance, and then we just have a look down the bottom, you can see you've got the actions. The action is allowed. That's all the same there. And then you've got log settings. If you log at session start, log at session end, again, all logging is done to CDL. And then you have the profile group you can select there, test DLP group, explicit and unknown. Others for quas marking, so on. But this does just work on group, so you create separate groups for it. So that's it really. That's on security profiles. I'm going to try and do the next one on the service connections and remote connections and how they go together and what they do. And then we'll look at configuring Global Protect for remote users, which is of course what most things do. And then that'll probably take me up to when this one expires, to be honest. So I'll probably end up having to generate another one in order to carry on. I won't waste much time this time. So a bit of a longer video than I thought it was going to be, 30 odd minutes. Please, if you've made it this far and you liked it, like and subscribe.